Chosen one, you carry a quiet strength that echoes far beyond your own life. And whether you see it or not, the ground you walk on is better because you're here. I need you to stay with me through this whole message. Don't brush it off. Don't scroll past it like it's just another video in a long feed of noise. There's something personal in this for you, and when you feel that moment, that subtle confirmation that this is speaking directly to your spirit, I want you to write your warmest wishes in the comments and seal it with Amen. Just once. From the heart. This is a chapter about wishes coming true and energizing the universe, about aligning your voice with the kind of future you want to live in. But after that moment, we're going deeper, because this isn't just about wishing for a better world. It's about recognizing the role you already play in building one. You make America proud, not because you're perfect, not because you're loud, not because you're famous, but because you're trying. And trying in a world that often feels divided and exhausted and cynical is powerful. There's something about being chosen that doesn't look glamorous from the outside. It doesn't come with flashing lights or a crowd cheering your name. Sometimes it looks like waking up early when you're tired, going to work when no one sees the effort, studying when you'd rather give up, caring about your family, caring about your community, caring about your integrity. That kind of effort doesn't trend, but it builds nations. America isn't just an idea written in history books. It's not just monuments or flags or speeches. It's people, regular people, people like you who get up every day and decide not to quit. And I know maybe you don't always feel proud. Maybe you feel frustrated. Maybe you feel unseen. Maybe you look around and think, does any of this even matter? It does. The way you show up matters. The way you treat people matters. The way you refuse to compromise your character when it would be easier to blend in. That matters more than you think. You make America proud when you choose honesty in small moments, when you choose discipline instead of distraction, when you choose growth instead of bitterness. That's not political, that's personal. And personal integrity is what sustains a country. There are days when it feels heavy to carry responsibility, heavy to care, heavy to stay hopeful. But hope isn't naive. It's rebellious in its own way. It says, I believe we can be better. And that belief begins inside individuals, inside you. You might not hold a public office. You might not lead a massive organization. You might not have millions of followers. But you lead something. You lead your mindset. You lead your household. You lead your circle. You influence people in ways you don't even realize. The coworker who watches how you handle stress. The child who watches how you respond to setbacks. The friend who notices your resilience. That ripple effect is real. There's a quiet dignity in showing up consistently, in building something stable, in refusing to let chaos define you. You don't have to agree with everyone. You don't have to solve every national issue, but you can control your own conduct. And that conduct is contagious. America is strongest when its people are strong internally. Not aggressive, not arrogant, grounded, self-aware, disciplined. You embody that more than you give yourself credit for. Maybe you've made mistakes. Of course you have. We all have. Maybe you've doubted yourself. Maybe you've questioned whether you're doing enough. Let me say this clearly. Growth is enough. Trying again is enough. Learning from failure is enough. You don't have to be flawless to contribute something meaningful. You just have to be willing. Willing to improve, willing to listen, willing to adjust, willing to stand for something instead of drifting with everything. There's something powerful about choosing responsibility over blame. It's easy to point fingers. It's easy to say, the system is broken. It's harder to say, what can I improve in my own sphere? But that's where real change begins. Not in grand speeches, in daily habits, in discipline, in respect, in effort. You make America proud when you refuse to give up on yourself, when you invest in your education, when you support your local community, when you build a business honestly, when you work with integrity, when you treat strangers with decency. That's patriotism in action. Not loud, steady. There's also something about resilience that defines you. You've faced setbacks, financial stress, relationship struggles, moments of doubt where you wondered if you were falling behind, but you kept going. That persistence is part of what makes this country resilient too. It's built on people who didn't stop when it was hard, who rebuilt after loss, who adapted when circumstances shifted. You carry that same spirit, even if you don't always see it. There's a temptation sometimes to disconnect, to check out emotionally, to say, why should I care? But you still care. That's why you're here. That's why you're listening. That's why something inside you responds when you hear words about purpose and contribution. You want your life to mean something. That desire alone is noble. You don't have to carry the weight of an entire nation on your shoulders, but you do carry your part. And when millions of individuals carry their part with integrity, something powerful forms. Unity doesn't mean uniformity. It means shared commitment to basic principles: respect, hard work, opportunity, accountability. You live those more than you realize, even when no one applauds it. There's also something about pride that needs to be clarified. Pride doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. It means recognizing what's good and choosing to strengthen it. It means loving something enough to improve it. You make America proud when you hold yourself to high standards, when you challenge yourself, when you refuse to let cynicism take over your heart. Cynicism is easy. Hope takes courage, and you have courage. I can feel it in the way you keep searching for growth instead of settling into apathy. You don't want to just exist. You want to contribute. Contribution is powerful because it shifts your focus from what am I getting to what am I giving. And giving doesn't always mean money or grand gestures. It can mean encouragement, leadership, innovation, service, kindness. Those things strengthen communities, and communities strengthen countries. You are part of something larger than yourself, whether you realize it or not. And that doesn't diminish your individuality. It elevates it. You're not just a face in a crowd. You're a builder in a system. You're a thread in a fabric. Pull one thread and the fabric shifts. That's how interconnected we are. You make America proud when you decide not to give up on your potential, when you decide to sharpen your skills, when you decide to raise your standards, when you decide to treat people with dignity even when it's inconvenient. That kind of character shapes culture more than headlines ever will. There will always be noise, always conflict, always disagreement. That's part of a free society. But your responsibility isn't to solve everything. It's to master yourself. Self-mastery is powerful. It means you don't let anger control you. You don't let fear dictate your choices. You don't let trends define your values. You think. You reflect. You act intentionally. That's maturity. And maturity strengthens nations. You are not insignificant. Even if your life feels ordinary some days, ordinary discipline creates extraordinary stability. You may never know how far your example travels, but it travels. Through conversations, through influence, through generational patterns. You're modeling something for someone, whether you intended to or not. So don't ignore this. Don't dismiss your impact. Don't minimize your resilience. You make America proud, not because you shout about it, but because you live with quiet strength. And quiet strength is rare. Keep building. Keep growing. Keep showing up with integrity. The country you live in is shaped by the people who inhabit it. And you, in your discipline, your effort, your character, are part of that shape. That's not coincidence. That's calling, and you're answering it every single day, even when you don't realize it. Chosen one. This chapter is about responsibility without pressure. Because when you hear something like, "You make America proud," it can feel heavy, like suddenly you're carrying something enormous, like you have to be perfect, like one mistake erases everything good you've done. That's not what this is. This isn't about perfection, it's about ownership. There's a difference. Ownership is quiet. It's steady, it doesn't shout, it doesn't panic. It simply says, "I will handle my part." You don't need to carry the weight of history. You don't need to fix every problem you see, but you are responsible for your character, for your discipline, for your contribution. And here's the part that's deeper than it sounds. Your private integrity matters more than public image. You could impress strangers and still be out of alignment in your own home. You could talk about values and not live them when no one's watching. But that's not you. You're being shaped into someone whose private life matches their public words. That's rare. That's powerful. There's something about this season of your life where you're being called to maturity in a deeper way. Not dramatic maturity. Not, "I have it all figured out." But emotional steadiness. You don't react the same way you used to. You don't jump to conclusions as quickly. You pause. That pause is growth. And growth strengthens communities in ways you don't always see. Think about it. When one person in a family decides to break a toxic cycle, that decision echoes through generations. When one person in a workplace chooses integrity over shortcuts, standards rise. When one person refuses to fuel division and instead chooses understanding, conversations shift. You are that one person more often than you realize. There's also something important to acknowledge here. Pride in your country doesn't mean blind loyalty. It means commitment to improvement. It means loving something enough to want it better. And that starts with loving yourself enough to improve. You've been doing that. You've been examining your habits, questioning your reactions, adjusting your standards. That's not weakness, that's leadership. Real leadership starts internally. Before you ever lead others, you lead yourself. And self-leadership looks like discipline when no one is checking on you. It looks like keeping promises to yourself. It looks like doing what's right, even when it costs something. You might not get recognition for it, but recognition isn't the point. Character is. There's a subtle temptation in today's world to be loud instead of solid, to perform values instead of embodying them, to speak passionately but live inconsistently. You're moving beyond that. You care less about looking good and more about being good. That shift is profound, and it stabilizes everything around you. When you walk into a room grounded, you change the energy. When you respond calmly instead of escalating, you change the dynamic. When you choose fairness instead of favoritism, you build trust. Trust builds communities. Communities build nations. This is how influence really works. Not through force, through example. You might not always feel strong. There are days you're tired, days you question yourself, days you wonder if your effort is enough. It is, because consistency beats intensity. You don't need grand gestures. You need steady conduct. Steady conduct is dependable. Dependable people create stability. Stability creates progress. There's also something about humility here. You don't think you're better than anyone else. You just hold yourself accountable. That's the kind of pride that doesn't divide. It unites. It says, I'll do my part, you do yours. There's a quiet nobility in that. And nobility doesn't require applause. It requires conviction. Conviction is what keeps you aligned when it would be easier to compromise. Conviction is what keeps you working when it would be easier to complain. Conviction is what keeps you respectful even when you disagree. That's strength. You're living in a time where opinions are loud and patience is thin. But you don't have to mirror that energy. You can choose steadiness. You can choose thoughtful engagement instead of reactive outrage. You can choose building instead of tearing down. And every time you make that choice, you contribute to something bigger than yourself. This chapter is about legacy, not the kind written in textbooks, the kind written in daily habits. What are you modeling for the people who watch you? What are you reinforcing in your environment? Your discipline around finances, your respect in conversations, your commitment to growth. Those things shape culture quietly, and culture shapes nations. You don't have to be extraordinary in a flashy way. You have to be consistent in an ordinary way. That's harder and more powerful. Chosen one, you make America proud when you refuse to become cynical. When you keep believing improvement is possible. When you invest in yourself instead of giving up. When you show up prepared. When you treat opportunity with gratitude. When you build instead of blaming. There will always be noise around you, but you are learning to filter it, to think independently, to stay anchored in your values. That independence is part of what defines this country too. The freedom to think, to grow, to choose, and you're exercising that freedom responsibly. That's something to respect. You don't need to announce your pride. You live it. In how you work, in how you parent, in how you study, in how you lead, in how you recover from mistakes. Recovery is underrated. When you mess up and adjust, instead of collapsing, you model resilience. Resilience is one of the strongest traits any nation can have, and it begins in individuals. It begins in you. Don't ignore this message, not because it's dramatic, but because it's affirming something you've quietly been becoming. More disciplined, more thoughtful, more intentional, more responsible. That trajectory matters. You don't need perfection to be part of something meaningful. You need commitment. And you have that. Keep refining yourself. Keep showing up with integrity. Keep choosing responsibility over reaction. You don't carry the country on your shoulders, but you do carry your character. And character is what sustains everything else. That's how you make America proud, not through noise, through steady, quiet strength. Chosen one. This chapter is about resilience when no one is clapping. Because pride is easy when things are going well. It's easy to feel connected to something bigger when you're winning, when life feels stable, when progress is visible. But what about the days when you're tired, when you feel overlooked, when the weight of responsibility feels heavier than the reward? That's where real character shows up. You make America proud, not just in your victories, but in your endurance, There's a certain kind of strength that doesn't get headlines. The strength of someone who keeps working when motivation fades. The strength of someone who keeps showing up when recognition is absent. The strength of someone who holds their values even when it would be easier to bend. That's you more often than you realize. Resilience isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need an audience. It's quiet persistence. It's the decision to try again tomorrow. It's the refusal to let one failure define your future. And here's something important. Resilience doesn't mean you don't feel tired. It means you move anyway. You've had moments where you questioned yourself, where you wondered if your effort was enough, where you looked at others and thought maybe they had it easier, but you didn't quit. That matters. In a country built on people who kept going through uncertainty, your personal endurance echoes something larger. You're part of a lineage of individuals who didn't have guarantees but moved forward anyway. That spirit is still alive. It's alive in you when you rebuild after a setback, when you adjust your plan instead of abandoning it, when you choose growth instead of resentment. Resentment is heavy. It drains you. It narrows your vision, but you're learning not to live there. You might feel it sometimes. We all do, but you don't stay in it. You process it. You move through it. That's maturity. This chapter is about emotional resilience, the kind that doesn't explode at every disagreement, the kind that doesn't collapse at every obstacle, the kind that can hold complexity without losing composure. You don't have to agree with everyone to be grounded. You don't have to like every situation to handle it with dignity. Dignity is powerful. Dignity says, I will not let my frustration dictate my character. That choice builds stability around you. There are people who look to you without saying it. They study how you react under pressure. They watch how you handle criticism. They notice how you treat people who can't give you anything in return. You're modeling something every day. Sometimes you model patience. Sometimes you model accountability. Sometimes you model how to recover after a mistake. That recovery is crucial. No one lives flawlessly. But when you admit a mistake, correct it, and move forward without ego, you demonstrate strength. That strength ripples outward. You also make America proud when you don't give up on your own potential, when you invest in your education, when you improve your skills, when you refine your craft. That dedication contributes to innovation, to progress, to opportunity. Opportunity doesn't sustain itself. It's sustained by people who value growth. And you value growth. You wouldn't be listening to this if you didn't. There's something deeply honorable about wanting to improve yourself, not just for personal gain, but because you know your growth benefits others. When you become more disciplined, your family benefits. When you become more financially stable, your community benefits. When you become more emotionally intelligent, your relationships benefit. Growth is never isolated. It spreads. There will be moments when the world feels chaotic, divided, loud. You can't control all of that, but you can control your own steadiness. Steadiness is contagious. When others panic, you stay calm. When others escalate, you de-escalate. When others blame, you reflect. That difference matters more than any speech ever could. You don't have to carry the banner of pride loudly. You embody it through consistency, through resilience, through discipline, through integrity. And let's be honest, there are days when you don't feel proud, when you feel frustrated with the state of things, when you feel disappointed. That doesn't cancel your commitment. Pride isn't blind optimism. It's enduring loyalty to principles. Principles like fairness, opportunity, responsibility, freedom balanced with accountability. You're practicing those principles in your own life, and that's where change truly begins. This chapter is also about hope, not naive hope, not the kind that ignores reality, the kind that chooses to believe improvement is possible. Hope is a choice. You choose it when you apply for the job again, when you rebuild after financial strain, when you forgive instead of hardening your heart, when you engage respectfully instead of withdrawing completely. That kind of hope strengthens the social fabric. You are a thread in that fabric. You might feel small sometimes, insignificant, but threads hold weight together. Remove enough of them, and the structure weakens. Your effort holds more than you realize. So when you wake up and choose responsibility instead of apathy, that's impact. When you show your children or your peers what accountability looks like, that's impact. When you contribute to your community in small ways, that's impact. Impact doesn't need a spotlight. It needs consistency. Chosen one, this chapter is about honoring your resilience, not pretending you're invincible, recognizing that you've endured more than you thought you could, and you're still standing. That endurance is strength. And strength, when grounded in integrity, builds something lasting. Keep going. Keep building. Keep refining yourself. The pride you contribute isn't loud. It's steady. And steady is what lasts. Chosen one. This final chapter is about legacy. Not the kind carved into stone, the kind carved into habits. Because when everything quiets down, the noise, the arguments, the headlines, the opinions, what remains is how you lived, how you treated people, how you handled pressure, how you responded when things didn't go your way. That's legacy. And legacy isn't built in a single dramatic moment. It's built in repetition, in ordinary days stacked on top of each other, in small decisions that feel insignificant at the time. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly become someone who makes a nation proud. You become that person through consistency, through restraint when anger would have been easier, through effort when quitting would have been quieter, through honesty when cutting corners would have been faster. That's the truth. This final part isn't about motivation. It's about ownership. You own your influence, whether you have a platform or not, whether you realize it or not. Someone is watching how you move. Someone is learning from how you react. Someone is forming their idea of strength by observing yours. That might be your child, your sibling, your co-worker, your neighbor, or someone you've never even met who sees how you carry yourself. You are modeling something every day. And here's the beautiful part. You don't have to be perfect to model strength. You just have to be real. When you make a mistake and correct it, you model accountability. When you admit you're wrong, you model humility. When you keep going after a setback, you model resilience. Those are not small things. They ripple. This chapter is about understanding that pride is not loud patriotism. It's quiet responsibility. It's paying attention to your own growth. It's caring about your impact. It's refusing to become numb or cynical. It's believing that improvement, personal improvement, still matters. And you do believe that. That's why you're here. That's why you listen. That's why you reflect instead of just reacting. You're not perfect, but you're intentional. And intentional living builds strong foundations. You may never fully see the effect of your choices. You may never know how far your example travels, but it does travel. It travels through conversations, through habits passed down, through standards normalized, through the way you carry yourself when no one expects you to. There's something deeply powerful about being steady in a time when everything feels unstable. You don't have to solve everything. You don't have to carry the entire country on your shoulders. You just have to master your corner, your household, your job, your discipline, your reactions. That's your sphere. And when millions of people master their sphere with integrity, something strong is built. You are part of that strength. Even if you don't feel extraordinary, even if your life feels ordinary. Ordinary discipline creates extraordinary stability, and stability sustains freedom. Freedom requires responsibility. Responsibility requires character. Character requires daily choices, and you are making them. Quietly, consistently. You make America proud, not because you're flawless, but because you're committed. Committed to growth, committed to effort, committed to improvement, committed to accountability, committed to showing up, even when you're tired. That commitment is rare, and rare things are valuable. As you move forward from this message, don't carry pressure. Carry clarity. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need applause. You don't need validation. You need alignment. Alignment between what you believe and how you live. And you're closing that gap more every day. That's something to respect. That's something to be proud of. Chosen one, don't ignore this. Not because you need hype, but because you need affirmation. Affirmation that your effort matters, that your resilience matters, that your discipline matters, that your growth matters. You are not insignificant. You are not invisible. You are not drifting without impact. You are shaping something in your family, in your workplace, in your community. Legacy isn't about fame. It's about influence. And you influence more than you realize. Keep building, keep refining, keep showing up with integrity. Long after trends fade and noise quiets, what will remain is character. And that is something you are strengthening every single day. That is how you make America proud, not through volume, through values, not through performance, through persistence. And that kind of pride, it lasts.